Hey, how's it going, guys, and welcome back. So earlier, I believe it was last week, I put out a poll asking you guys if you would be okay with me covering topics that aren't necessarily monster taming specific, but still have implications on the monster taming genre, and this is kind of where we're at. This is a video by Ciggy Snake called Gaming Isn't Fun Anymore, and I do have a follow-up video already in the works for that. I've already pretty much put it together, but basically, this is a sentiment that I've seen a lot. And it's something that a lot of creators have been talking about. You can see one right down here. Josh Strife Hayes put out one. So a lot of people are feeling that the AAA landscape is just different than it used to be. And some detractors will say, oh, no, it's just nostalgia. But there are real differences. And I think it has to do a lot with how video games are created. Whereas before, you kind of had to have the best games in order to sell well, whereas now we see all these like monetization strategies and stuff like that. So anyways, I'm not gonna dwell too much on that because that's for a different video, but I wanted to sort of do a reaction and discuss this video. I will leave Ciggy's channel linked below, and shout out to my my search when I was trying to look for this video again. I called him Soggy. All right, let's do this.
If you were to look at the video game industry of today, you might think gaming is in a golden age. Video games have never been more popular. Professional gaming is a growing and respected sport, and game publishers see record profits year after year.
So this is actually something that a lot of people will bring up to defend modern games. Yeah, but games are selling better than ever. People will like flex that like Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield sold, like I think Sword and Shield is the second best-selling Pokemon games next to the original. People will bring that up and use that as a flex when it's like, so what you're saying is sales equals quality, because a lot of people try to use that as like an own to people who are critical of video games, and we'll talk about those types of people that like to shill for these giant companies later. But let's continue.
This surface-level success, however, conceals many of the core issues plaguing modern games: hypermonetization, egregious laziness, and a total lack of passion or vision. In terms of quality and actual care put into games, modern gaming has been on a consistent decline for close to a decade now.
Yeah, and this goes to the whole like live service thing, right? A lot of games will release in what you'd really consider an early access state, and this is something that kind of makes me laugh because we cover a lot of indie games on my channel. I will play an early access game, and people will be like, ugh, I would never pay for an early access game. They have bugs and this and that, but you'll buy this, okay? The current sort of landscape of gaming in the AAA scene, these releases are basically what are early access games. Sometimes they shouldn't even be considered that. Sometimes we're getting alpha releases and we're just being told it's a live service and that if we just wait long enough, the game will be good, right?
From predatory microtransactions, to broken, unoriginal games, to the current drought of new and interesting IPs, gaming has been reduced from a form of entertainment and artistry to a corporatized money-making venture.
I've been bringing this up for a while too. Like, it used to be a bunch of people really passionate about games that were leading these projects. Now it's just a bunch of out-of-touch people in business suits trying to see how much money they can make while like trying to balance the scale between how little quality can we put in or how little work can we put in and how can we maximize our profits.
As someone who's been into gaming for the vast majority of my life, as someone who genuinely appreciates the passion and artistry present in games, this mass corporatization and denigration...
This looks like a monster taming game. What game is this? Hylix 2? Interesting.
...of the medium is depressing at best and infinitely vexing at worst.
Looks like
I know
a Shin
I'm not
Megami
alone in
Tensei
this
type
stance
game.
either. The countless failures and disappointments of the modern games industry has left most gamers tired and frustrated. To that end, I want to chart the slow descent of this once great industry, look at where it's heading, and what we should do in response.
The Dark Age of Gaming. Now, this is a spicy title for this video, and I think that there's a lot of good points to be made. I look at the dismal state of modern gaming, and again, you can't really argue when you have these games that release in just terrible states. And like, okay, there's going to be exceptions. Elden Ring, exception, right? Like, for every Elden Ring, there's 3 FIFAs. You know what I'm saying?
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe to Ciggy. This is a good video. I'll leave their YouTube channel link below. Haven't checked out much of their other content at all, but check them out.
Before we can discuss the dismal state of modern gaming,
Okay, I haven't played this game or really looked into it, but I heard this game launched terribly.
I want to first look
And it's just getting fixed now.
at the era which preceded it, along with what made it unique. I think few would argue that the mid-90s to late 2000s was a true golden age of gaming, and for a number of reasons. While the actual quality of games from this time period can't be understated and will be discussed, one of the biggest factors in this golden age was the state of gaming and the broader games industry. Gaming was considered a more nerdy or unusual hobby.
So quickly before he gets into this, I think 1.2 is this is like at the point where this is the most advanced gaming was before patches were a regular thing on consoles. When you look at like the GameCube era, PS2, Xbox 360, this was the last sort of generation of consoles before they started patching in games. Now, obviously, there are tons of great games for the PS4, PS3, Xbox One, and the Wii had some good games, I guess. But there are still plenty of good games during that era. But I do think that's where the sort of shift started to come, especially with like Nintendo, right? Nintendo stopped focusing on better hardware in favor of more casual games that would make more money. And then other companies started focusing more on DLC and stuff like that. I think when it first started, it wasn't too bad. Like when you just had like real DLCs and real expansions, but it started to kind of snowball from there, where eventually they would just start selling like cosmetics and stuff like that.
Hobby back then. You weren't getting bullied at school for not having the latest Fortnite skin, but for playing video games in the first place. This relative unpopularity meant that the games industry was just a fraction of its current size.
Yeah.
Conversely, game development...
It's true. I've even... Okay, so this isn't... this is about, 10 years ago? So about 2013, so a little later than this, but I remember having a conversation with a girl at my work, and we were talking about video. I wasn't having a conversation with her. I was having a conversation with one of my buddies there. We're having a conversation about... No, this is about 11 years ago, sorry. We're having a conversation about video games, and she goes to us, she's like... At the time, I was about 18. She's like, you guys still play video games? I was like, yeah. She's like, ugh, I could never date a guy who plays video games. Mind you, at the time, I was, 18? So I was, I'm pretty sure I was engaged at that point. And I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, it's so childish. I'm like, yeah, but you'll date someone that watches a soccer ball go from one side of the field to the other. No disrespect if you like sports, but it's just the interesting mindset that existed back then. Like, because it's like something that is more synonymous with, like, I guess it's more kid-like, I guess, playing games, even though there's M-rated games. Anyway, tangent aside, yeah, gaming used to be something you weren't necessarily praised for doing.
Developers and publishers were much more numerous back then. Various small and independent groups all competed in the open gaming market, and you'd either sink or swim depending on the quality of your games.
Yeah.
While many studios sunk, those that swam were handsomely rewarded, and typically redoubled their efforts for their next project. Furthermore, these small...
Yeah, and then this is the thing. A lot of people will defend these billion-dollar companies like Game Freak / the Pokemon Company when they're making 99% profit and more profit than they've ever made. Whereas, like, back in the day, these games still made good profits. It just wasn't absolutely astronomically ridiculous. Like, it's so weird to me how people are like this. Honestly, like the people that I made a joke tweet on Twitter. I just typed out "meat riders" or "ride the meat" or something, and people were commenting because it was completely out of context. But I just find it crazy how many people will like ride these companies' meat when they're literally like just looking at their player base like numbers, right? And then everyone will say, "Oh, well, they have to make money." Are you against that? It's like, how would you guys like it if I just started uploading like clickbait content that was just absolutely like had nothing to do with what I was talking about? I'm just trying to make money. Or I started taking like scam sponsorships. Like, there is a line, and a lot of games, in my opinion, as of recent, have crossed it.
Studios were often staffed and led by dedicated gamers and enthusiasts. This naturally leads to much greater passion and care put into the games they produced. Take, for example, Bungie back in the early 2000s. Their singular goal when producing the Halo trilogy was to make the best, most enjoyable game possible.
Yeah.
And it shows in their outlook.
The difference between good enough and awesome is so big, and I mean, there's standards set by everyone here.
That is exactly what Game Freak used to have when they were talking about Heart Gold and Soul Silver's development. This is not a nostalgia thing. This is a legitimate thing that used to exist. It used to be make the best game. You're passionate about it. This is something that you want to do. Now it's just like, we need to make the most money. Kids are going to put down the games. We need to have the next release ready. Like, things have changed. People can try to cry and say it's nostalgia. It's not. Like, things have legitimately changed in the landscape.
I mean, good enough sucks. You can't do good enough. It's a hard kind of thing to live up to, but I mean, the game's going to be better for it.
We are the most cynical people. Like, we are the jaded crowd who, if a game doesn't entertain us in 5 minutes, we stop playing it.
The passion you see here is honestly commendable, and was something found in abundance both at Bungie and the broader games industry. In addition to having an industry clearly committed to quality, the technological development seen in the 5th, 6th, and 7th generations dramatically expanded what could be done with video games.
Yeah.
This is perhaps best demonstrated by the transition from 2D to 3D, swapping pixels for polygons. An additional dimension not
Which, by the way, side note, 3D is not objectively better than 2D, like a lot of people like to act. Not saying that Ciggy's saying that, but something I always see in the comments. Like, I wish more of these games are 3D. Well, when we're talking about indie games with low budgets, the pixel art games tend to look better, just saying.
only enabled new and interesting...
Like, in my opinion, like A Link to the Past today looks a lot better than, N6. Like, if you were to compare A Link to the Past on its current hardware, like if you were to boot up an SNES and play it, versus Ocarina of Time on N64, I'd say A Link to the Past looks better, right? Because pixel art is kind of timeless. Whereas, like, there's a lot of nostalgia for me behind, like, Ocarina of Time. But objectively, I do think the pixel art games look better than a lot of the N64 games.
Forms of gameplay, but allowed for beautiful art styles and actually realistic graphics. These are your killer 7s for the former, and re-4s for the latter.
Yeah.
The size and scope of games also increased substantially in this time period, going from megabytes in size to gigabytes. Whereas games on cartridges had to make best use of very limited real estate, CDs allowed for about as much game as you wanted, and at then modern graphics. Finally, internet access had reached hundreds of millions, even billions by this time period, meaning games no longer had to be primarily single-player or couch co-op titles. In short, the games industry not only had the technology to make new and engaging games, but the will and passion to do so. And I feel the results truly speak for themselves.
Oh, SMT3, let's go. Metroid. I don't know what game this is. Sonic, obviously.
Gaming during this golden age was, as the name implies, a pretty good time. Quite simply put, gamers were spoiled for choice in the 90s and 2000s. While shovelware and cheap cash grabs certainly were a thing, you had an absolute smorgasbord of quality.
I will say, this is something that would be a lot easier to do if I didn't upload every single day. But I really do like the editing in this video, especially like leaving all the names of all the games included.
Titles to choose from, no matter what you were looking for. If you wanted to play something on your own, just pop in Tony Hawk or literally anything from Nintendo at the time.
Twilight Princess is amazing.
If some friends were over, you had Halo or Mario Kart to rage at and laugh over. And if you wanted to meet cool new people on the wide world of web, WoW was still relevant. And not terrible. Gaming as a whole was just fun. People treated it as an enjoyable, exciting hobby. You'd hear from a friend that the new Scrimbo Bimblo slaps, drop 40 or 50 bucks on it, and have a good time. Gamers had hope in the industry, and while expectations weren't always met and missteps were had, it was good for a time.
Exactly. Like, people will cherry pick like the bad games that existed. Like, oh, look at all these crappy NES games that existed. Yeah, but like the bigger budget titles were generally better and were generally good games back then. Whereas now, the bigger budget title seems to be the bad ones, but then you also have like a bunch of, because don't get me wrong, indie games are awesome, but there are a bunch of bad indie games too. But like, so now you have to kind of like sift through a lot more bad games than you would have before. Where like you can, like before you could be like, oh, a new Zelda game, I could trust that. I mean, Zelda's still good, and maybe that wasn't the best example. You could say, oh, a new a new COD game came out back in like MW2, MW3 COD days, right? You can say, oh, a new COD game's coming out, I know that's going to be good. Whereas now, you're kind of like, will it be?
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. The Roman Empire experienced unmatched prosperity and security for hundreds of years, before its slow and pitiful death in the 5th century. Gaming is no different, and much like the Huns and Goths who brought low the Romans, it was an outside force which plunged the games industry into its dark age.
I'm going to speed
The
this up a little
smartphone.
bit just because I didn't realize
In
how long my
1998,
response
Nokia
would
released
end
their
up being.
6110 model of mobile phones. The 6110 offered numerous improvements and updates over the earlier Nokia 2110, one of which being the addition of Snake.
Yeah.
Snake is a game you've likely heard
Mobile
of,
games
seen,
did
or
do
played
a
at some
lot
point.
to...
You play as a
I
snake
know where this
navigating
is
a plane
going.
in search of food, and use to maneuver around your ever-lengthening body as you go from point to point. It's a simple
Also,
little game,
shout out to the
something you
Fair
could
and
play for a
Woods
few minutes at a
music.
time,
I use that a
but
lot
its
in my
inclusion in the
videos.
6110 was one of its most liked features. In line with this, mobile phones going forward would often include short little games similar in scope to Snake. Many of these games were shipped with the phone itself, and while it was possible to download additional games, they were never terribly common or popular. The system, however, would be completely turned on its head in 2007 upon the release of the iPhone. The iPhone, and more specifically its App Store, offered users a variety of applications and games for purchase. Much like the iPhone itself, the storefront proved wildly successful. Though it released with only 500 apps, in just 2 years this number increased to well over 100,000, and these
Yeah.
apps were downloaded over 2 billion times. Initially, the App Store would sell their games for a one-time, upfront cost. You know, how games were always sold.
Yeah.
This business model would eventually be expanded in 2009 to give apps and their developers new and exciting ways of making money. The biggest addition were in-app
New and exciting for them, not for the players. Or for those people that keep bugging me about when Coromon's coming out on mobile because they think it's going to be free.
purchases, a system we would now call microtransactions. While many apps made ungodly amounts of money off this system, perhaps the most influential and iconic game in this landscape is Candy Crush.
Yeah.
Candy Crush, released in late 2012, is nothing special as a game. You match 3 pieces of candy in a row to earn points and accomplish objectives. Match 3 titles had been around for some time and have had successful entries such as Bejeweled. What sets Candy Crush apart from its peers, however, was its method of monetization, predatory microtransactions.
Yeah, you basically,
Candy-
you could not play unless, after you died a certain amount of times, unless you paid.
Crush was free to download, it was seemingly designed to incur, then profit off of addiction. First and foremost, the actual gameplay rewards you at every step, complimenting and praising you for making the right move or just having pieces fall in the right places. You're given dopamine hit after dopamine hit
Yep.
with easy levels
Look at all
until you
that
reach a difficult
dopamine,
one you
like-
can't quite beat. Candy Crush operates on a life system, and once you run out of lives, you're cut off from the flashy lights and easy dopamine. You can either wait a ridiculous, uncomfortable amount of time until you can get your dopamine fix, or just pay 99 cents for an immediate refill. Both options funnel you into playing, and eventually paying more and more, and it was this scanner box design that led to Candy Crush's success.
Yeah, and people will sit here and say, oh, well, free to play is good because everybody could play. But, like, I would rather just pay, I don't know, how much would you pay for Candy Crush? Like $10? I'd rather pay $10 and then be able to play as much as I want than have to pay 99 cents every time I want to respawn, right? Or every time I want to refill my lives. Like, you end up spending way more money. Same goes with Pokemon Go. Instead of having to spend, all these coins on egg incubators and raid passes and this and that, I'd rather pay friggin' like $50 for the game and just get everything unlimited, right? But they build these games around microtransactions. Microtransactions aren't just popped in. The games from the ground up are built surrounding these monetization systems.
To put it in perspective, Candy Crush alone brought in about $1.1 billion in 2014.
Insane.
That same year, the entire games industry had revenues of $85 billion. A single game with a basic art style and simple gameplay loop made up over 1% of the games industry,
It's
all because it
insane.
had an unbelievably effective microtransaction system.
It's insane. And all the people that paid money to do that contributed to this downfall that we're experiencing.
This runaway success told the games industry 2 things. First of all, video games were big money, a business venture that could be insanely profitable. This is not to say the games industry wasn't already massive, it was raking in tens of billions at the time, but it put into perspective just how much money you can make off of games. Second, a game doesn't have to be good in the traditional sense to be profitable.
Yeah.
Making a game that is legitimately fair and enjoyable doesn't have to be a prerequisite for success. It just has to have the right mechanisms to fleece people of their money and have them come back for more. It was around this time period of the early to mid-2010s that you began to see the exportation of this philosophy from the mobile market to gaming as a whole. It's this philosophy which treats games more as a dry business just to make money, rather than an earnest form of art and escapism that led to the slow
Exactly.
decline of gaming. For any
This is what I keep saying. Games used to be built to be good because it was art. Now they're built with the sole intention of making money, and all the other bells and whistles are just a side thing to that. Whereas a lot of indie developers will make their games with passion that they want to get paid for. It's a very different thing. It's just crazy.
anyone who's paid even a modicum of attention to the broader games industry over the past few years, you'd find it mired in scandals, mediocrity, and disappointment.
Yep.
The reason for this goes back to the philosophy shift mentioned earlier. Games aren't being made to be enjoyed, but to make money. It's this hard shift in priorities that has just gutted the soul of gaming and replaced it with flowcharts, focus groups,
They're just building it to make it sure that you're addicted rather than enjoying. They're building it to make sure that you're playing enough to make shareholders happy with like the live service games. Like, oh look, we've had this many logins this month, or this many users this month. They don't care to make good games. They care to make games that are good enough.
Groups and revenue projections. Take, for example, the explosive growth in microtransactions over the past decade or so. Modern games are often replete with issues such as slow progression, unbalanced gameplay, or lack of content.
Yeah, and they do it on
isn't
purpose.
A mistake. These issues are introduced on purpose, with the only way
Yep.
to overcome them being microtransactions. It doesn't matter if fair systems are dropped for a less engaging gameplay loop. It doesn't matter if microtransactions prioritize the size of your bank account rather than in-game skill. It doesn't matter if microtransactions have led to some of the most addictive, predatory systems imaginable.
Yep.
Microtransactions make an incomprehensible amount of money. That's the only reason.
And somehow, even though Activision got rid of their loot boxes in COD, for some reason they still exist in FIFA and these other games. Where I know Europe really came down on the loot boxes and stuff. I don't know how FIFA is still getting away with it.
They're so prevalent. To the games industry, it's more important that their septuagenarian shareholders see a 15% APY than actually give their customer base a semi-decent product.
Exactly.
Outside of making games with these predatory, money-first systems, modern games are often released in a broken and buggy state. The recent poster child of incomplete garbage is none other than Saints Row. Aside from having some genuinely cringe-inducing writing and gameplay that's boring 2 hours in, the game just does not function. Pull up literally any full-length review, and you'll see a deluge of bugs, glitches, and broken features in this game. Saints Row isn't an outlier in this.
And there's no shame with these developers either. Like, think about Game Freak and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Like, they care so little about their reputation that they're willing to ship something that unfinished, and then people defend them. They ride the Game Freak / Pokemon Company meat. They just sit there and they're like, "Yeah, this is fine. This is great. You're just a hater. You're just being negative. You're just being toxic. Maybe they'll fix it." Like, wake up.
In this regard either. You had Battlefield 2042 last year.
Even like as of the time I'm recording this, the Pokemon Company on Twitter, they actually started teasing some sort of thing with Wailord. So I'm assuming we're going to be getting more Pokemon added back to the game as DLC. And people will defend it. It's just insane to me.
And Cyberpunk 2077 the year before that. Both incredibly hyped games that should not have shipped in the state they were in. The people at the helm, and more specifically the publishers, just stopped caring. They knew a bunch of gullible saps and stupid teens would drop $60 on their latest shitfest, so why even bother? Worst of all, if a game totally flops, many of these studios and publishers are so large they can just eat the losses, shelve their broken game, and move on to the next
they just
lazily named
abandon the
entry.
games.
Finally, this corporatized business.
Look at the Wii U. The Wii U is the biggest console rug pull ever. They came out with like no games for the Wii U. All the games that came out for the Wii U, they remade on the Switch. And you think Nintendo would have been like, you know what, boys, we screwed up. Like, if you return your Wii, we'll give you a voucher. No. They're like, too bad. Eat the loss. Eat the loss, bitch. Too bad. Right? Like they do stuff like that all the time, and nobody says anything. Nobody bats an eye. People just, people do, but a lot of people just, they ride the sausage.
Game development has just killed any passion and vision within the larger industry. Rather than prioritizing player experience and creating new IPs, game developers are more preoccupied with garbage sequels, unnecessary remakes, and shameless trend chasing. For me, the epitome of this visionless, trend-chasing game development has been the new Halo trilogy. I use the term trilogy
you want to
loosely
talk
here,
about
as the stories in each
trend
game have little to do
chasing?
with each other.
Look at Warzone. Literally, the second Fortnite came out, they tried to make Call of Duty like the Blackout, which, to be honest, like Blackout was fun, but like it's just hilarious to see all these games become battle royales because an indie game kind of popularized the genre. Obviously, PUBG was before, but Fortnite really like threw it into high gear, and then all these other development studios were trying to copy it. It's just so shameless.
Each other, and are all pretty mediocre.
And then people will sit here and call like freaking Monster Sanctuary a Pokemon clone. Like, get real.
In their own right. Outside of this lackluster writing, every new Halo apes mechanics from other popular games, presumably because money. 4 has score streaks and loadouts, 5 has pay-to-win loot boxes, and Infinite has a live service season pass that's so barren and devoid of content, it's genuinely shocking. One of the most groundbreaking, influential, and just plain fun series ever created was utterly castrated by out-of-touch, money-first suits.
Yeah.
Most tragically of all, this fate has fallen countless other IPs and series, all reduced to shells of their former selves by visionless hacks and unoriginal frauds. The AAA games industry has fundamentally regressed, its priorities totally misaligned with the point of gaming, and unfortunately, it's a situation that I don't see changing anytime soon. It's blatantly obvious that money is the biggest, if not single motivating factor in making games nowadays, and if that's the industry's goal, then they're certainly succeeding. There's no longer a major incentive to make interesting or good games when you can just copy-paste total schlock every year and still make billions. You can vote with your wallet to change things, sure, but the next whale they catch completely cancels out whatever difference you might have made.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the AAA games industry has largely consolidated under a select few major corporations and studios. This, coupled with the increasing barriers to entry due to technological advancement, means there's little reason for innovation.
Exactly. Like a lot of people will try to compare indie games to AAA games in terms of like graphics and stuff, and like these indie games can't keep up with the Modern Warfare II, the new Call of Duty game, 3,000 developers. The game's still not very good. That's why I call it II and not 2. But My point is, like, how are indie studios supposed to keep up with that?
And few grounds for competition. The whole of AAA gaming has just become stale and sad, and out-of-touch ghouls like Phil Spencer and Andrew Wilson are perfectly fine with that.
Call them ghouls.
I mentioned at the beginning that I discussed what should be done regarding the modern gaming industry's dismal state, and I feel the best option for gamers is nothing. The modern games industry at this point is a joke. I think by now this should be fairly obvious. Huge conglomerates just push out unoriginal, unenjoyable, and/or incomplete titles year after year, yet are able to bank off of microtransactions and a lazy consumer base. Unless CEOs actually start caring about art outside of money laundering, or if predatory microtransactions get regulated into oblivion, I highly doubt there will be any major changes in the industry. So why bother with it at that point? It's better to avoid this constant deluge of disappointment than hope COD 37 will be marginally better than its predecessors. Instead, rather than deal with the cultural void that is the modern games industry, just go back to that golden age. A friend of mine remarked that sad some of the best games ever have already been made, and while this is pretty accurate, it's also true. There are countless excellent titles from back in the day that many of us haven't gotten around to or didn't hear of when they were released.
It's a good point.
They're games often made with passion, and because you couldn't just patch in fixes back in the day, they're actually complete. Furthermore, strong communities for retro titles are still going strong to this day, be it for speedrunning or just for enthusiasts of a particular series. Alternatively, while AAA publishers and studios have seemingly abandoned passion for green slips of paper,
indie devs,
you're much more likely to find well-crafted, lovingly made games from indie studios.
Lots of
from early
good indie
classics
games
such as Super
out
Meat
there.
Boy and Binding of Isaac,
As long
to
as you
recent
don't
titles like
need
Hades or
those
Ultrakill,
super
indie games have
hyper-realistic
consistently turned out innovative
graphics.
and engaging games actually worth your time. While there are weird and bad entries in the indie scene, at the very least it's a space that cares about the art of gaming along with their community.
Exactly.
Finally, if you absolutely have to play the latest Gears of Halo Theft Auto 5 or Gorbino's Quest, get it at a discount. Or
yeah, and
at a
stop
discount. All in all,
and stop paying for these battle passes. And Mike, like, I don't understand. If you really want to play COD every year because that's your thing, right? I can get it. Stop buying the battle pass. Can you stop buying the battle pass? Pokemon, stop buying the DLC. Like, trust me, I got Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because I had to review them for you guys. I have to get this DLC when it comes out because I want to review it for you guys. That's my job as a content creator. But if you see that I make a video about the Scarlet and Violet DLC and you see that it's bad, let's just say hypothetically, don't pay for it. Like, honestly, at this point in time, I think this is why they've increased the amount of pre-order bonuses in a lot of games. Because a lot of these games ship so bad that they need to give you more incentives to pre-order them. And I just gotta say, like, you should probably not do that anymore with a lot of these AAA games. Unless it's a studio that you really trust and there's some really cool stuff, you're better off just waiting for reviews to come out.
even if the modern games industry is in its dark age, it doesn't mean gaming has to be. There are more than enough excellent games, new and old, to play and enjoy. Games that are free of the hollow influence of this once great industry.
Exactly. Because I'll go back and play games I haven't never played before that are just from that era, and they're better. So it's not nostalgia. I don't have nostalgia for certain games. Like, okay, I never played... I still haven't beaten, actually. I have to go back to it because I'm a busy guy. But I never played A Link to the Past. Ever. So I started playing it on, I think it was a Game Boy Advance ROM. Shush, don't judge me. Anyways, I was playing it on my phone. And it's a good game. It's a really good game. And there are countless examples like that. Whereas you play a lot of these modern games and you just feel something missing, like you're playing a diet game, if that makes any sense.
Thank you so much for watching this video. While I haven't covered gaming content much on this channel, outside of a video on last year's Activision fiasco, it is a topic I am interested in and fairly passionate about. The general state of gaming at present...
Pretty much just the outro. Definitely check out Ciggy's channel. I will leave a link below. And other than that, yeah, the basic sentiment with this video and the follow-up video I have planned is that these microtransactions, these business models that revolve around making money first and a game second, you can be someone who agrees that devs should make money. When you have good developers, when you have like these great indie devs like let's say the Coromon developers or the Nexomon developers, right? I want to see those games succeed. When Monster Hunter Stories 2 made 1 million sales, I was clapping. Yeah, that's great. This is a good game. It's got content. It's got passion. I want to see it do well, right? When Elden Ring sells well, anything from FromSoft, when those guys make a game that sells well, it's a great thing to see because it's showing that passionate projects can make money. But the problem with modern gaming is making a lot of money and making a good profit isn't enough. They want to maximize it to the point where they're basically like penny pinching at this point. Like, making 10 times isn't enough. They need to make it like 100 times, right? I guess penny pinching isn't the right word here because it's a lot more than that. But you guys know what I'm trying to get at here. Like, they want to make as much money as humanly possible, regardless of what that does to their brand, what that does to their community, or anything like that. They don't care about that. They just care about maximizing their income. And it's sad to see. But anyways, guys, stay tuned for that. Yeah, it's a very disappointing time in the AAA and even in some cases AA landscape. As someone who covers monster taming games as my chief focus here on the channel, as like the main thing, it makes me a little weary. Like, I want to see double and AAA monster taming games try to challenge Pokemon a little bit, but at the same time, like, is Activision going to come out with a monster taming game that's just like, hey guys, there's 100 monsters in the game, but you can do gotcha mechanics to get the other 50. Like, I want it to happen, but it also worries me. So that's pretty much all I can say at this point. Stay tuned for the next video. If you guys enjoyed my reaction, definitely make sure to like and subscribe. You can check out my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon linked below. Special thanks to our patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona, and Exodus. And again, check out Ciggy Snake, linked below. Peace out.